How's it going, everybody? This podcast is brought to you by Rise Make Life Workout, a health, self-development, and lifestyle platform building a passionate community of knowledge seekers, creative dreamers, and future leaders.
For details on the latest Rise event that will feature expert speakers in the field of self-development and growth, check out www.rise-workout.com. That's
www.rise-workout.com. Enjoy the show. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the High Frequency Club podcast. My name is Marwan Stellario.
And I'm Sinead Bierman. We're here talking all things self-development, growth, and mindset.
In this week's episode, we talk to Rebekkah Burnett. She's recently become a mother. She's a trainer and group fitness instructor at Les Mills Britomart. You may even hear her newborn son, Wolf, in the episode today.
Yeah, we talk all about Rebekkah's transition from being in the arts space, working in marketing, and as an actress, moving into being a fitness trainer, and how that all became quite a lot and started to affect her health.
Yeah, super relatable and valuable episode because we really touch on the subject where you're super passionate about something, but then how much of it is too much?
Yeah, and where do you know how to draw the line? And I think particularly for females out there, understanding that our body does work differently to men in regards to too much training and how that can affect our health, in particular our reproductive system. So we definitely cover a lot of that today.
She shares a lot of practical tips on rest and recovery, managing burnout, and how she deals with it now with the knowledge that she's going to share with you all today.
Yeah. As always, make sure you're following along at the High Frequency Club and let us know what you think once you've had a listen.
Peace. Man, it's a vibe. It's a vibe with the cicadas.
Cool. Yeah, and it's such a comfy couch.
Yeah, awesome. So welcome, Rebekkah. Good to have you on here with us. This is our first guest of 2022, so we've been super excited. Obviously you've had a very busy schedule, so thank you for fitting us in. Should we just get the elephant out of the room? You're obviously a new mother.
Yes.
Awesome. What's your baby's name?
His name's Wolf.
Cool.
Yeah, named him before Kylie Jenner named him Wolf, so just want to claim that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's awesome. He's 10 weeks today.
Yeah.
And like you guys just saw him, he is a big, plump little man.
They do grow so much, I think, from when they're a newborn, obviously, and they're tiny, and the next minute you've got, like you said, a little man.
Yeah. He's like just surpassed 6 kgs, so he's a healthy boy.
Yeah.
Growing.
No, he's
awesome.
Yeah.
And for the people that don't know you, did you want to introduce? That's all good. If you can hear it in the background, it's Pluto.
Yeah.
He's just playing
Pluto
around.
wanting to play.
Yeah. Big Weimaraner dog.
Yeah, so for people who don't know you, did you want to introduce yourself, give yourself a bit of a backstory?
Yeah, sure. I'm Rebekkah Burnett. I am currently working at Les Mills as a trainer, teaching ceremony and conquer. Obviously taking some maternity leave now. And yeah, I've got a 6-year-old Weimaraner, 10-week-old son called Wolf. And my husband Tristan is a surgical registrar, currently working at Middlemore, which is keeping things interesting with all his stories. I guess that is me.
It's a little rundown. Nice. Now, something that I was intrigued to learn about you, which I didn't previously know, was that you had quite the background in arts before your transition into the fitness and health space. So, I sort of wanted to hear a little bit about how you sort of got into your marketing role and then into acting, and then sort of where along the lines that transition out of the arts into fitness was.
Yeah, sure. When I was at uni, I studied graphic design and I majored in advertising. So I actually did pretty well, won weirdly the photography award at uni, even though I wasn't studying photography. So I had sort of these two passions, and fortunately I sort of stepped into an art director role straight out of uni, which is really hard with graphic design, like jobs are scarce, but I was able to work in advertising for a couple of years, and that was really cool, but I sort of got to the point where I liked it, but I knew if I was going to stay there for like 5 or 10 years, like I could just see where I was going to be stepping to, and I think at the time it sort of seemed a little bit too easy or too safe. And because I was doing photography on the side, I then actually started working at a modelling agency for a year. That's actually where I met Tristan, my husband. And it was sort of in that year I started to think a little bit more about how I loved acting. So decided to apply for the Actors Program, got in, and then in 2013, that's when I studied to become an actor, which was, Martin, you know what it's like. It's really intense to study acting, and then just you're throwing yourself into an industry you've got no control over, and hoping that, you know, next week there might be an audition, and you are waiting for that big opportunity, but then you're also doing things for free, doing, you know, side projects. And I was just working a retail job at the time. So as much as I tried to make it work and keep positive, I think after about 4 years, it's sort of, you know, I'd done a few things that I could be proud of. And then my mental health just started to suffer, where quite literally I sort of lost sight of who I was in a way, because I wasn't able to act. And the only thing that was keeping me going was my enjoyment of fitness, which I'd sort of found up until that point was the thing I'd do in the morning to look forward to, because then if I went to my retail job, it was okay. I could be happy because I'd got those endorphins in the morning. And ultimately, I remember the conversation with my husband and then my family of just, I think I'm going to sort of put acting to bed. I can be proud of what I've done. And that's when fitness sort of, after being approached a few times about like, you're quite good, you could be a trainer, decided to take it seriously. Yeah.
Do you ever miss it, or do you feel like the group fitness instructor aspect helps with that outlet?
For sure. Like, you would understand, you get an element of being on stage in a way in front of a group of people. And I do miss it, because I do like being a character. I think that was so much part of it. But I have found that this industry for me is so fulfilling that I'm okay with it. I think I don't regret going to acting school, because I learned so much in that year, and then the years following I was able to, you know, I'll be able to tell Wolf I'm on this program years later. But you know, it's just something that you can't control, and it's just so frustrating, especially when you've like grown up going to a good school, you've controlled this, you went to uni, you're thrust into an industry where you're like, I cannot apply for auditions. Like, people would be like, why don't you just go on Shortland Street? And you're like, okay, like I'll just write to them and be like, can I
hire me?
Hire
me, I'm perfect.
It's just, you can't do enough about it, that I think it just started to eat away at me. So knowing what that's like, it's sort of, I'm okay with it.
I think that would be frustrating, like you said, if you're doing all the right things, like you're like, I'm working on this and I'm working on that, to then not be somewhat rewarded for that. Like we said, when you're doing all the right things, but it just might be that there's not a role for you.
Yeah.
Like that there's nothing.
And most times actually, when you don't get a job, you don't get told why. you just don't get called up again.
Yeah.
You know, so you get ghosted.
Or if you do get told, they're like, it's because they wanted a brunette, or they wanted someone who looked like the sister, and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do about that? You know, they're just things that are the out of the control variables that you're like.
And that often you don't know until afterwards. Afterwards you get told like, oh, a brunette got your spot, and you're like, oh, okay, that's maybe why I didn't get picked, or was it something else, or
just so many things that you don't know what goes on behind the snes.
For sure. So acting school, and then you were like, nah, I'm done with this after a little while, and then you got into the fitness industry. What was that transition like? What got you into finding a career in the fitness industry?
I suppose around the time where I knew acting was something that I needed to just not let go of, but put to the side, I realised how much I loved training. Like, it was something I looked forward to every day, and then I was getting such good sort of feedback from trainers, and I was noticing myself getting more and more fit. The opportunity presented itself where Tristan and I were going to go to Melbourne. That's where he's from. So he was going to go study, he was going to go work locuming at hospitals, so he could spend time with his family for a couple of months, see what the hospitals were like there. And I saw that as a time to actually study personal training, so I could get my qualifications and be in Melbourne as well, and actually be in a different place where I could just focus fully on it. So we went over to Melbourne, and I just really threw everything into it. I was like, this is going to be my thing. This is going to be a new career. I really worked so hard. I studied and got my qualifications done within a couple of months, and it was up to a year-long course. And I was doing things waking up at 4 or 5 a.m. and then walking to the gym and then training myself, and then I'd come home, finish assignments, and then maybe go teach another class. I also got my certification in body combat over there. So I was doing all of these things, being I've got a goal, I'm ticking all these boxes. And it did feel really great, because I knew that all the hard work was paying off, because you've submitted your assignments and you get them sort of the next week, being you pass. So it was a real good sense of achievement and getting really fit, and then coming back here, just knowing where I was going to be heading. Yeah, I just felt like I was ready to make this my career.
Yeah, I can see your schedule was a 4 a.m. wake up, teach 6 classes at F45, do your own training, exercise your dog, teach another 2 classes in the evening, and go to bed late.
Yep.
How did you manage that schedule?
Well, I don't think I did. And looking back, it was typical, got to the point where burnout started to happen. But I didn't have any education about, how much you should be resting, or this sort of job to work at 2 separate gyms as a group fitness instructor, which is where I found my passion. It wasn't personal training, it was group fitness. Of course it was unsustainable. And I would, feel like I had these huge highs and have so much energy to teach my classes at F45, because I loved the members and I loved that I was finally working in something that just felt really natural. So I had all this energy for that, and then I would go to grit, and straight after teaching, and then I would come home, have a couple of hours where I'd be okay, I've got a couple of hours to rest, and then I know I'm gonna go teach in the afternoon or the evening. So it was I just kept fumbling through it all, and then I'd get to the weekends and be like a zombie, or I'd have to work and just be I can't actually see a way out of this, because I have to keep going. It was I know this is kind of getting on top of me, but I'm just sort of I don't have time to think about it. Yeah. And for sure there were signs that started to break down of, I would get quite irritable, or, I'd fall asleep in the afternoon, which is not like me. And then, there were just certain signals that things weren't right, and it was starting to get on top of me. I'm sure you've experienced that when you've taught too many classes, or you've had too many clients, and then you're but I can't see out of it, because I just have to do it tomorrow and the next day.
I'm thankful that I only teach one class, one program, and that's sprint. And I remember one time I did 5 of those, in comparison to people who do so much more, right? And I was I'm so fucked. I'm so fucked on top of the clients that I have to go see. And I'm sure so many instructors and even members can relate to doing too much, In hindsight now, what advice would you give Rebekkah when you were going through that time?
Oh gosh, just to slow down. And because I think if you are a personal trainer or an instructor, you have so much that you want to give your members or your clients. And I really gave it everything. And I also know myself, I'm quite introverted. So when I'm in front of people, that social energy, I literally, it takes a lot out of me. Teaching a class, it's not just the physicality of it, and it's not even teaching sprint where I have to do the work the whole time, but the energy of giving myself to people. I would now know that, if I was teaching morning classes, that would be enough. You don't need to teach anymore that day. Protect yourself, and definitely don't spread yourself too thin across 2 different roles, like at different gyms.
Yeah, because it's so easy, especially when you're so passionate about it. And that's how instructors first come into the industry, right? They're so passionate about the program and the classes that they do, that they go head onto it, and then we forget that it's always going to be there.
Yeah.
You know, that it's always going to be there. It's all because whether we do 2 classes or 5 classes or 20, it's still going to be there the next week.
Yeah.
I think there's this big fear of missing out when it comes to stuff like that. Like, can you relate? Because you're an instructor yourself.
Not necessarily missing out. I think for me, when I've got into those situations where I'm doing just way too much, it was usually more like when I would take on more classes than just my own and covering for other instructors because no one else was free, no one else was available, and you'd be the last person that you kind of felt like you're letting the team down if you didn't say yes, because everyone else was sick or at work or whatever. It was like, okay, I'm the only one left, I'll say yes to it. But then doing that for an extra 5 other classes, and so instead of my usual like 7 or 8, then it was like 15 in a week.
Yeah.
And then it was like, no wonder I'm feeling so burnt out and didn't have the own like energy for my own classes. And that's when I was like, this isn't fair that like I'm giving all my energy for other people, and then I've got nothing left for my own classes.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but at the time, like you said, it was always like, okay, I just got to get through this week of all these covers. But then before I knew it, the following week would be the exact same, and then I'd look back and I'm like, Shane, you've done this for 4 weeks in a row now, where you've done 15 classes every week. You can't keep sustaining this. Like,
That's crazy, 15 classes a week.
And then I'd have to be so hard on myself for being like, no covers this week, like just do your normal 7 classes, that's it. And it would be so hard, like we'd get to a Tuesday and I've already had to say no to 8 covers. Yeah. And I'm like...
That's so good though to be able to say no, because I for sure would get that thing of like, no one's replying. And then you're like, yes, I'll cover.
Yeah.
You're like, oh shit.
And was there an element for you, because you were obviously, like you said, that was what you were doing for work at the time, so like
financial
financialize it, it's your job.
Of course, yeah, for sure. Like you don't make that much money as a group fitness instructor, obviously. Like, and you kind of, when an opportunity is there for a cover, you're like, oh well, that is more income. So yes, you just don't. You put your finances before your health and your mental health, because you're like, you need the money, obviously. Yeah.
So what? Sorry.
No, I was gonna say, and to some degree, maybe that thought of like, oh, I'm a group fitness instructor, this is what I do, therefore I can do it. Like, of knowing like, this is me. I should be able to manage doing 5 classes in a day. Like, that's my job.
I am fitness.
Yeah.
Like, that sort of mindset was like, but of course I am tired quite often because I exercise a lot. But this is my job. That mindset was ingrained. Yeah.
So what boundaries do you set now that you didn't previously?
Yeah, I suppose, which we'll go into soon, going through hypothalamic amenorrhea, mouthful of a word. Now I know so much more of how my body works. I only work at Les Mills. Like after I left E45, I only work there. I do some other work that's got nothing to do with fitness. So I know where the limit is, and I also know my body's signals, and I know not to ignore them now. Like, it's such a different mindset than just my job is fitness. Quite literally, I'm a woman. My job is fitness. How do I look after myself? It's different now as well, because I have a child. You have to have energy for him because he's relying on me quite literally. So I just have a totally different mindset of how to fuel myself, how to sleep, how to work around where I will be in my cycle, so that I don't burn out. And I think as well, just my priorities have changed in terms of, there's still financial strain, which will be there when I go back to work, but weighing up what is more important in the long run is going to be in the forefront of my mind, because I've been there and I know what it's like to feel sort of out of control, and when things can get on top of you, the stress and how that affects your body is not worth it in the long run. Yeah.
Where along the way in your like fitness journey and with teaching so much, did you either sense that maybe something's not right, or that you got your diagnosis of HA?
Yeah, I suppose, as I said before, it was a long time coming, and I knew in the back of my mind that something wasn't quite right. But COVID, for sure, forced me to stop. it was the very first lockdown that week. It was March. I literally got time to sleep, and I noticed I got my period for the first time that I'd like noticed for months and I was like, that's funny. Like, I don't think I've even realized if I have or haven't had my period. And when you have an IUD, which is I had at the time, it can actually really reduce how much you bleed. You can still be ovulating, which is the main part of your period, but it can really make it quite light. So the fact that I noticed it, I was like, oh gosh, like that's interesting. It must be because I'm resting. Having said that, the pressure of COVID and what it did to finances, it also made our wedding be cancelled. We didn't know when that was going to happen. There was a huge sort of, my dad was going through chemo. It was like this huge combination of stress that snowballed where I actually upped my training at home. And I was like, I don't know how to deal with all this stuff. What do I do? From previous history, I turned to exercise. So every single day I was basically doing like HIIT at home. And I look back on it because it's on my Instagram and I'm like, you're insane. Like, I was so fit, but I was, at a dangerous weight where, it's surprising I didn't get a stress fracture or anything more serious didn't happen, like looking back on it. And because of that timing and our wedding not happening, we decided we don't know when we'll be able to have it. Why don't we do the reverse and have a baby? And it was that decision which I did know that it wasn't going to be that easy because I wasn't really getting my period. I also knew once you get your IUD out, it takes a while for your cycle to come back. Similar to being on the pill, except the hormones that you get from the pill are more intense. So after that happened, I was like, okay, I'll give it about 3 months. That's sort of the downtime of getting it out and getting your body back to normal. But after those like 3 or so months, I knew that I was still training quite a lot. My period hadn't come back. I just knew that what I was doing was not sensible. And I was like, deep down, I know it's probably, I can rule out things like PCOS. I had a pelvic scan just to make sure that nothing more sinister or serious was going on. But I knew that there was sort of something I was doing that was going to make it hard to become pregnant. And it was the second lockdown that we had in about August where I really looked at what I was doing again. And I'd stumbled across HA, Hypothalamic Amenorrhea, on a podcast. And I started listening to podcasts about it and other women's experiences, and I was like, I know that this is me, because it was saying things like exercising too much, not eating enough, under fueling, stress, what you're not eating, all of the cortisol levels that are spiking because of the amount of exercise you're doing. And it started to just sort of like all these light bulb moments of like, what am I doing to myself? Like, this is what I had. And that's when I started to just learn about it more and more and sort of come to terms with, okay, I've done this to myself and I need to try and get out of it. And it was such a confronting thing to know that what I'd found in a career that I loved so much was kind of being the thing that was going to stop me having a baby. Yeah, it was very confronting. A lot of tears and a lot of sort of like, what am I going to do? This was me, and people look at me like, oh, she's so fit, and suddenly I represented something that I knew wasn't healthy. Yeah.
Was that something that in the podcast and stuff that you'd been listening to and learning about, that they were saying that in order to sort of recover or heal from it, that you were going to need to pull back on what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. There's a woman called Mary Rinaldi who wrote a book called All In, and she talks a lot about how you really have to, if you realise you've been diagnosed with HA, you need to like cease all exercise, and you need to eat, X amount of calories, rest, do all these sorts of things, put on weight. So I knew that what I was doing, like all of the boxes were being ticked of like, like you are doing this to yourself. And I sort of had to take a step back and really look at all of my habits. And I think that's really hard for people who are fit, work in the industry, or just are recreational gym goers and love it so much. You see a lot of it at gyms like F45 and Les Mills. People are really fit and they go to these intense classes, and without the education, you don't realise that doing back-to-back grit or back-to-back HIIT classes and not fueling yourself properly and not resting is actually, putting your body under such stress and your mind under such mental load. I also had a lot of emotional sort of attachment to the way I felt about my body. So I think I was a little bit different in that for HA women, a lot of the time they're A-type personalities, so they're quite regimented in it's because they're reducing this food, they're eating X amount of calories to control their weight, they're doing these classes because they're trying to get to a body type. For sure, because it was my job and I myself exercised too much, I kind of used exercise as a way to control the way I also felt about myself for a long time, which was I just didn't like my body from previous histories of something traumatic that I went through. So it really, again, was confronting to bring that all back up and be like, I know why I also use exercise as therapy, because it's got me out of a place of an almost depression. So it's my way to feel good, which is really healthy. Like, it's nothing against exercise, which is also, I was quite, when I started talking about it, scared to put that out there that I'm not bashing it. It was, well, I've got to use it in a way where it's also healing. So, you can't do HIIT every day. You've got to, part of it was learning, do I like exercise as much as I think I do? Or do I just like the intensity because it pushes everything away and I don't have to think about shit? But then I started to realize doing things like yoga, body balance, Pilates, movement really was my thing. I just needed to find a way to incorporate that into my like HA recovery, where I was more balanced. I wasn't always like fight or flight, which is where you are if you have HA. You are like constantly stressed and your body's running on all these reserves because it's like, she's always stressing me out with exercise and she's not eating enough and we need to survive, is how you're kind of living.
Which is why, like you said, you would have always just had that energy to do your classes, and even after doing those classes, we're still like, yep, I want to go to a grit class now because I've still got so much energy to burn, when really your body was just fighting to survive. Yeah,
the way I'd sort of, I think with HA, what starts to happen is your body quite literally is running off all the reserves you're giving it. So I wasn't eating enough. I was having something in the morning, maybe a snack at like a break between classes. And throughout the day, because I wasn't getting enough fuel, it felt like the energy I had was because I'm so fit, I'm so energetic, but it was my body really holding on to everything I was giving it, because it was like, shit, she's starving us. She needs to make it through to the very end of the day, where my body knew I would have this massive dinner. Like, that's where all my calories would be. I've had this massive dinner, and then I'd have like smash in a lot of chocolate or like a lot of lollies. I always think about it, and I still eat this shit, but I would have like an entire packet of those snakes, those natural confectionery snakes. Like, I did that so many times, or the dinosaurs, because I just needed the calories. Like, I just...
your body needed the sugar.
So it was like, I would condense all of these calories, eat a massive meal, but it wouldn't have enough protein. It would be huge, and then my body the next morning would be like, okay, she's going to do this all again. She starts with her smoothie, but maybe she's not going to eat a proper meal up until like 1 o'clock, and it's not going to be enough to sustain the input's not going to be enough to sustain for the output that you're doing. Because I'm on my feet a lot all day. I'm teaching, I'm giving energy. It's sort of using all those reserves And that's why you don't menstruate, because your body's like, shit, okay, we've got to use what she's giving us to breathe, to walk.
To just do basic bodily functions. The thought of having to house a baby in here is, hell no.
Quite literally, your reproductive system becomes dormant, because it's like everything you're giving is just for survival. Don't use menstruation as like energy, because it's not safe to have a child. So let's like turn that off up until we deem it is safe.
I got two things I want to touch on. One is the identity crisis / change for you to go through that. And secondly, I'm obviously a student of this. This is the first time I've ever heard of HA. I don't even know how to say it. How do you say it?
Yeah, it's hypothalamic amenorrhea.
Hypothalamic
Amenorrhea. So like hypothalamic, just to dumb it down a bit, hypothalamic part comes from your hypothalamus, which is the part of your brain that controls your reproductive system.
Gotcha.
So your hypothalamus and your pituitary gland, I don't have a science brain, but they talk to your reproductive system. And then amenorrhea literally means no period. So it's like your hypothalamus talks to your reproductive system, and that connection is what turns it off.
Gotcha. So how do people know if they've got it? Because and correct me if I'm wrong, you figured out because you wanted to have a baby and you realized things went wrong. What about for the woman who isn't trying for a baby? Is that the only way for them to know, or?
Yeah, that's such a huge part of why I wanted to tell women about this, is because I think when you hear it and you know what it is, you think, oh, but I don't want to have a baby, I'll put that to the side. But what it can actually do, not having your period, is so much more serious, because it can lead to injury, because your bone density when you don't have your period is reduced because of the lack of estrogen. It can also lead to cardiovascular disease later on in life, as well as osteoporosis, osteopenia, because of not having high bone density, etc. I suppose for me, what I try to communicate is HA has to be... It's sort of like a lifestyle factor as well. So you have to rule out other things like PCOS first if you know you're not getting your period. It's the mental stress as well. So that connection, there can be so much of an emotional connection to not getting your period as well. You don't even need to be an exerciser to get HA. It can be job stress. So if there's something going on, and it might be body image, and it might be restricted eating, it might be all of these emotional things that are causing so much stress on your body, that's also communicating not to get your period. I guess for women, if they're trying to identify it, what I did was I looked at my lifestyle and looked at, that I wasn't sleeping properly. That also really screws up your hormones, because you're not resting and you're not supporting your body. I looked at what I was eating and what I wasn't eating around hormonal health, and identified that lack of carbohydrate really screws up a woman's menstrual cycle, because we really need it. Protein, fats, like just the way in which, if you are an exerciser, which is who I more speak to, obviously, if you're not fueling before and after properly, and you're of a lower weight as well, it can really screw up your body thinking it's safe and recovering around exercise. So you really just have to look at everything you're doing. Like, are you waking up really early? Are you fasting before you train, and then are you rushing to get to work and not having a proper meal until about lunchtime? So you just have to see where there are stresses in your life, and also be quite honest with yourself. Is there anything that has an emotional attachment to the way you feel about yourself? Because for sure that mind-body connection for me, I reckon, was such a significant part of why it took a while to get my period back. It's not a matter of just, I'm going to eat this amount of calories and I'm going to stop exercise so much, and I'm only going to do HIIT once a week, and I'm going to put on X amount of weight. You have to actually feel okay about yourself. That was such a huge thing for me. Yeah, and that's why I think for a lot of women it doesn't come back straight away because they think they can just do all those things, but if you don't do if you don't do the mental work, then
I can definitely relate to that because I think like when I went off the pill because I just felt like I didn't need to be on it anymore, so I was like, I'll go off it. And in my head I was the same. I was like, oh, it'll probably take 3 months or so for my cycle to come back to its normal, and it had been 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. I was like, okay, it's almost like a year. I've still not got it back. I'm like, oh, maybe I should go see someone to see if like there's something wrong. But again, the whole time I didn't care because I was like, it's convenient not having it type thing. And I was like, and again, I felt fine because I was like, I didn't see it as being like much of an issue. And then went to a doctor, I had to have bloods done just to make sure that like nothing was, and I had other like weird little things, like I was getting more skin pigmentation and like hair falling out, and that's when I was like they were all kind of like hormonal signs. So I was like, I'm assuming some hormones are out of whack. Had a blood test, like my progesterone, estrogen, testosterone were all fine, but my prolactin was like 3 times the upper limit. And she was like, oh, like prolactin's always high if you're pregnant or you're breastfeeding, she's like, are you either of those? And I was like, no. And then she was like, or otherwise sometimes stress. Are you stressed out? And I was like, oh no. But like looking back, I was like, well, that's when I was going through like an eating disorder and was like constantly fighting myself with like knowing, like kept thinking, oh, once I'm over this eating disorder, like then I won't be stressed because I'll be fine because da-da-da. But not realizing like how much more pressure I was putting on myself with that. And then, and same, she'd offered other things. She was like, oh, we can give you this pill as a one-off to check that your ovaries are all good. And then she said, oh, the other cause of high prolactin is if maybe you've got a benign cyst on your pituitary, because your pituitary gland's what produces prolactin. So she's like, we could probably just do a brain CT to rule that out. And I just said no to both options because like deep down, as much as I didn't admit it to the doctor, I was like, oh, I know it's me. Like, I know I'm the problem here. So I was like, no, I don't really want any of that. And I just thought I'd just keep giving it time. And it took almost shy of 3 years before it came back. And that was once I was finally over my eating disorder and there was no restriction or binging or overtraining or undertraining. It was just, I finally got to a balance point of like, train when I feel like training, eat what I want when I want, and just, it was once that was kind of all,
there's something exactly to be said about that. It was only because COVID happened that it eventually forced me to do something about these habits, because otherwise you kind of push them to the side and you keep going. It's only when you're mentally kind of ready, as you said, you knew deep down it was you that was doing it, but you had to work through that mental shit. And when you were okay about it all, like that was when finally one day, just out of random, like I just sort of had it, I was like, oh, I feel like a bit crampy, and I was like, that kind of feels like an ovary cramp, not like a stomach cramp. And I was like, that's random. Went to the toilet and I was like, oh my god, like feeling again.
Wow, like so
but like no one could have done that work for you. You had to figure it out for yourself. Which was the same for me. I could have, gone. I knew, I was finding things about the pill and why you shouldn't go on it and stuff like that, but I knew that, deep down, it's just you're your own self-help, sort of. You have to be ready to do the shit, not just...
And that's where I wasn't keen on, like, the options that the doctor was kind of like, she's like, oh, I'll put you on this other pill or this other pill. And then even one of her options was like, oh, well, if you had it while you're on the pill, you could always just go back on the pill. And I was like, I don't want to go on the pill. Like, that's why I'm off it. And then... so I had friends that had gone through similar issues and were like, oh, you should just ask for a referral to an endocrinologist and they'll do more testing and they'll do this, this and this. And that's where, again, I still thought, oh, that's going to be more expense for more tests, more this. And I thought, again, deep down, I was still like, I know it's me. And that, like, I could spend all this money to see all these different specialists when really I just need to sort my shit out.
I'm running away from... I'm trying to put a Band-Aid on it by seeing all these professionals when actually there are signs that it's my eating, it's my underfueling, it's all of this other shit.
So just going back to the identity change for you. So what was the type of identity do you think that you had in order for you to do all those things that were creating the stress? And how was that transition like? And what is the identity now for you to be able to pull back?
Like, that's such a cool question to ask and actually hear myself in my head think about, because I for sure like myself better now. Before, I had so much pressure on myself to be this fitness person, to feel like I was good enough to teach these sorts of classes and be around the sort of instructors that I am around. Like when I did start working, I felt really inadequate. And that's probably what even fueled me to feel like I had to be as fit as I was, and being lighter probably made me feel like I could jump higher and all that kind of shit. And then when I went through HA and really had to rediscover, like, you're not this healthy person that you kind of think you are, and your fitness is what is kind of hindering you, it made me appreciate kind of obviously how my body works. And then I started to be like, I need to tell other women about this. And it was really funny, the day that I taught ceremony, and I talked to this really lovely girl who used to work at Eve Wellness, that supplement and wellness brand. And after that class in the morning, I actually said to her, because I know that she'd had her own previous history of disordered eating and just overtraining, etc., and she, came through it. I was like, I actually am going through something at the moment called HA, and we started talking about it, and then that's the first time I'd opened up to a complete stranger about what I was going through, and how I was concerned about wanting to put the message out there, and educate more women that I was seeing at the gym. Later that day, I got my period back. It was the weirdest thing, and it was sort of like letting it go and letting myself be vulnerable. Yeah, it was. I actually messaged her like that day, being like, this is so weird. And it was like taking the pressure off myself to not be this, perfect fitness, I've got this all together, and actually being like, I've made a mistake here. I don't want you guys to make a mistake. I need to educate people. It was like just letting that weird wall down. It was like a pressure off myself. And then, of course, opening up eventually to other women. I actually just liked myself more, and I felt like people liked me more, because there wasn't this wall up of like what we were seeing was unattainable. It was like, she's a real person. She went through some shit. She's being honest that she, was at a weight that wasn't healthy for her body. And like, for sure, just I feel like a more just open, vulnerable person. I like that women can talk to me about this sort of shit, and it also prepared me to eventually become a parent. Like, I had to, learn that it was okay to put on weight, and it was okay to rest and do all of this stuff. To then, when you're pregnant, of course, you go through a completely different change. But I'd done all of that work to be like, I guess the transformation was just liking myself more and accepting myself, and actually being approachable. Like, I just, before I probably, just seemed like someone that wasn't that, approachable, I guess. And it was true, because I was sort of, that's not how you should be training and shit like that.
Yeah, I'm sure you know this, but the reason why habits are so hard to break or create is because of the identity that we thrust upon ourselves. And it's only until we start to really rewire who we think we are that we can actually create new processes and systems. What tangible things did you do to help rewire new habits for yourself? Like, did you do journaling, or did you do meditation? Did you do any types of activities like those?
Yeah, I think what I really had to do is learn how to calm the fuck down, because you know, when you are in this sort of job, as we were saying before, your cortisol levels are fucked. So you're just in this high, I am like on fire all the time, and I'm high functioning, and I'm like
always just hyping. I find like you're just hyping everyone up, and then naturally the gym environment is just a hype environment. You can't help but being like high energy when you're there.
And then when you are going through like the recovery of HA, your hormones are going out of whack, because you're starting to actually get hormonal feelings. So I what I learnt about cortisol was, you know, you can't be that way all the time. That's the reason your brain is receiving these messages of it's not safe to like she's constantly stressed. I started to, podcasts were really therapeutic for me. So I would look up channels that would talk about it because it would help me relate. And when you're going through it, you don't really know anyone else that's, you know, going through it, so you kind of feel alone. So that was really helpful. So when I would walk Pluto, it was sort of like a way to calm down, would just be like, I'm understanding more and more about what I'm going through. And then I knew that it was going to take a while for my energy to sort of not really dip. It was like I was hypersensitive to stress. So if I would teach a class, I would then go sit in the car and I would like take about 5 minutes, or if I was in the studio at like F45 and all of our classes would finish, I'd lay down on the floor and I'd put my headphones in, and for 10 minutes I'd just like breathe. And I don't mean in like too much of a spiritual way, because I'm and honestly I'm not. I would just know how to use my breath from acting experience. I would just know how to calm myself down in that way. And I would do that like quite literally all the time, or I'd do it at home. I'd lie for like up to half an hour just breathing and try to connect my brain to like my body, like my reproductive system in a way, and kind of try and visualize that connection. And I did that for a long time, up until the point where it became natural to calm down from a class. I also started acupuncture, which the point of that was to balance my energy levels, and it doesn't work for everyone, but I felt every single time I went, I felt really calm, and I felt like I'd been sort of recentered. It also encourages your body to get the blood flow going again in your reproductive system. So that, of course, was part of it. And it felt like that was something that I was doing that was hopefully working towards it. And that acupuncturist used to be a midwife, so she was so knowledgeable about like women's health. I also just had to be realistic about my exercise and that I needed to wean it off. And my husband, I have to say, was such a huge help, because he knew how much I loved it, and he like, it really is a happy place for me. Like, it was so confronting knowing I had to reduce it. Like, I was like, how am I going to do this? Like, this has helped me in my life so much. Like, we worked together to be like, okay, you're going to start up here, and then over certain weeks, you're just going to slowly reduce the amount of more of the intense stuff I was doing. So it would be like, okay, 3 classes this week, and then next week try and do like 2 intense classes. And by that I mean like, you know, the high intensity, the stuff where your heart rate's really high, and then try some yoga on the days where you still want to move, but you shouldn't do that high intensity shit. And I was really kind to myself as well, because I know how much I rely on exercise as like a mental thing. So if I did 2 classes a week and they were intense, and then I knew that I wanted to do another one, I was like, okay, just try, do your body balance, see how you feel, and then like if you really need it, do the HIIT. But I didn't have to rely on that, which was good. But I just said to myself, like, if you need to, like, it's going to be there, but like, let's just take it one step at a time. Yeah. And just, I think part of accepting what I'd done to myself was really helpful, to be like, just take it slow. Like, it's okay that it's not your fault. You didn't have this knowledge before. Like, it was such a head fuck to be like, I've done this to myself, but also like, it's okay because you didn't know any of this before. Yeah. So just being patient, and I can hear my baby crying.
Yeah, Rebekkah, so what would your advice be to people who are in that process of cutting down because they know they are doing too much and their body is on that limit red line? What would your advice to be for them? Because a lot of people get into fitness because, you know, they feel inadequate. Yeah. Now all of a sudden cutting back, those traumatic feelings start to arise again.
Yeah.
Like, what would your advice be to them if they're going through that right now?
I suppose it's, coming back to that honesty you have to have with yourself. and look at why you're doing those intense workouts all the time. And for me, it was because I was, it was linked to something that I was trying to sort of chase away, where my brain would like turn off. And it was not the exercise itself but Wolf is joining us.
Yeah, that's all good.
But
Wolf's in the party.
it wasn't the exercise itself, but it was what it meant to feel like I was making certain feelings go away. I think, having a hard look at what you're doing and why, and then probably like trying the lower intensities and seeing how your body actually feels, and how week to week maybe that's actually working more, so that when you do the HIIT training, if that's what you love, you can actually smash it and you're not
already
so
fatigued.
exhausted.
Yeah.
And I think, specifically speaking to women, you should really want to work with how your body is made, because we've been educated, up until recent years that everything, all the studies have been on men, and our bodies just work in a different way than men's do, and we should want to be able to smash our intense training on the days that we can and not feel inadequate when that energy's not there, and that's a physiological thing that we can't help. So if more women would want to look into that and want to celebrate that, I can do the intense movements on certain days and maybe not the others, and that's okay, then we'd be like way less hard on ourselves when we can't be as amazing as, I look back and be like, I was so shit in that workout. So it was probably because I didn't have the energy, because physiologically my body had the high hormones that stopped me feeling energy. But you can't. You have to do the mental work yourself, I think. Sorry.
No, that's completely all good.
Wolf wants mum's attention now.
Sorry, Wolf, we've taken enough.
Tell me all about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Rebekkah. Really appreciate that. I think so many people are going to relate to that. I've definitely been schooled and educated over the past hour on this conversation. But if people want to hit you up and ask you more about your journey and your expertise and your knowledge, where can they find you?
Thank you for having me. You can just contact me on Instagram, Rebekkah, REBEKKAH Burnett, BURNETT is my handle. And I guess, sorry, Wolf is like, he's like, I'm here. I guess it's just, you want, for women who just want to know more about HA, podcasts are a really good place to start, and just acknowledging that maybe you're not in a place where you should be with your hormones. And he is losing his shit.
All right, that's all good. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.